Last week, we said that the beauty of this country was in the harmony of its diversity. Tonight, we will be giving another example. This time, it is in the banking industry. Many around the world are starting to adopt what they consider as new, while to us in this part of the world, it has been adopted since the 1970s, with origins going as far back as 1,400 years since the dawn of Islam. What this has done is that it regulates and mitigates risks as well as avoids crises that the world has experienced. We've seen it in our lifetime a few times. Actually, one of the most prominent that might resonate with many is the subprime mortgages in the United States. This created a ripple effect around the world and led economies into a state of shock, and also guided many regulatory bodies into a state of reassessment and readjustment. This brings us to what we said at the beginning. The beauty is in the harmony of the diversity. Good evening. You're watching the Business Insider here on Nile TV International, and I'm Ayman Salah. Our weekly program tackles events affecting economies and business, and we aim to bring you the inside story. Welcome back. Let's start with our first news item for the week. The Finance Ministry has narrowed the deficit target for this fiscal year to 6.2% as the economy absorbs the global economic effects of the war in Europe. This figure is down from a previous 6.9% target and suggests better than expected performance. The new 6.2% target implies the government was significantly ahead of its target prior to the outbreak of war. Moreover, the government is now targeting a primary surplus of 1.3% this fiscal year. That's an improvement on the 1.1 to 1.2% it had predicted in January, while it is still planning to bring the debt to GDP ratio below 90% by June, as outlined in the draft budget. These results come as byproducts of policy interference, with the Central Bank of Egypt devaluing the Egyptian pound last month and raising interest rates by 100 basis points. The government officially requesting support from the IMF to mitigate the impact of the war on our economy, with talks for a fresh financial package, and the Gulf has also moved to support with investments and funding from Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the UAE, totaling some $22 billion, with an estimated total funding gap for the current fiscal year standing at around $17.6 billion. Speaking of Gulf support, the Abu Dhabi Wealth Fund, known as ADQ, acquired state-owned stakes in 5 EGX-listed companies on Tuesday as part of an agreement reached last month to provide the country with emergency liquidity. The fund purchased MBE and Bank Misr, as well as the National Investment Bank and Alexandria Port Authority shares in the 5 entities for around $1.8 billion, according to the stock exchange. ADQ already has a strong portfolio of Egyptian investments. In 2019, it established a $20 billion joint investment fund with the Sovereign Fund of Egypt to channel funds into a variety of industries and assets. We'll be back. Welcome back to the Business Insider. Tonight I have the pleasure to be joined by a renowned banking professional, Sahar Damati. A pleasure having you on the show. She's a banking and economic expert, as well as many other things. And if I'm going to talk about your bio, I'll probably spend the rest of the show talking about it.
Thank
Pleasure
you
having
much.
you.
Such a wonderful introduction.
All right, so Islamic banking is one of the topics that we will be discussing tonight, as well as the latest financial and economic developments taking place in Egypt and in the region. Let's watch this report on Islamic banking and then start our discussion.
An Islamic bank is one that complies with the principles of Islamic jurisprudence or Sharia law in all financing, banking and investment transactions with a Sharia board composed of Islamic jurists who are continually consulted regarding all aspects of new banking transactions and is subject as a financial institution to the supervision and control of the central bank. It provides clients with the transactions and products, whether investment deposits, investment certificates, or saving accounts, and meets the client's various financing needs, including the Islamic options for letters of guarantee, letters of credit, and covered cards. Although the global crisis has affected banks worldwide, Islamic banks have not been affected by the crisis due to their stability and financing methods. The practice began in the 1970s in Egypt and Saudi Arabia and became popular in other countries, with over 500 banks currently present and more than 300 conventional banks offering Islamic banking services to their customers. Islamic banks have witnessed one of the fastest growth rates, between 15% to 20%. The diversified products offered by this system include Mudarab, which is a contract for sharing profits by providing capital from one side and labor from the other. Wakala, which is a contract used to invest deposits where the client authorizes the bank to invest his or her money for a certain percentage of the capital to be deducted from the realized profit. Murabaha is defined as a sale at the original capital plus determined profit from the bank buys and owns the commodities identified by the customers. Musharaka financing is where the client requests financing for a particular project where the bank shares in the anticipated profit or losses. Unlike loans, Musharaka financing has no interest rates. Then we have Ijara finance, which is a contract that allows the customer to lease a particular asset, use it for a specific period of time, after which it's finally owned. This financial lease is adopted as a result of the customer's inability to buy a particular asset in cash. Another product is Istisna, which is a contract under which the client asks the bank to manufacture or construct a unit according to certain specifications set by the client, who will pay the prices in installments. Another product is Istisna, which is a contract under which the client asks the bank to manufacture or construct a unit according to certain specifications set by the client, who will pay the price in installments. Then there are other financial instruments such as Sukuk. This provides financing for large projects. It is the Islamic version of the bond without falling into interest-based debt. Investors on the secondary market that are looking for investments that can be liquidated easily will find that Sukuk are ideal. Thanks to the secondary market for Islamic securities, investors can sell their securities and obtain the cost of their certificates. If the projects that back their Sukuk certificates have generated profits, this results in a quick return in investments. This means that Islamic financial instruments are well suited for fund management. Banks or institutes can use part of their fund to purchase Islamic securities and then sell them on the secondary market when liquid assets are needed.
Welcome back to the Business Insider. Once again, allow me to welcome Ms. Sahar Damati, banking and economic expert. A pleasure having you on the show once again.
My pleasure, sir.
We'll delve into the sukuks as a source of financing in a moment, but first, there's a major sale that took place on Tuesday in the Egyptian stock market with ADQ, the Abu Dhabi sovereign fund, as the main buyer. Your assessment?
I think it's a very good transaction and a good support to the country, of course, that you have such a big fund coming and also investing in a big bank, 18% of the bank, which is CIB actually. Hence, what has happened is that they picked part of Bank Misr National Bank ownership in CIB. From that sense, you are putting money in public sector banks of the country. So they are putting dollars. And we're talking here about a big amount, approximately 911 or 920, almost a billion Egyptian pounds.
$1 billion.
I'm sorry, almost $1 billion, that's very true, as well as in other 4 companies such as the tobacco and fertilizer and most of this will go to the government as well. So I think from an investment point of view, it's a very good investment. It took place through IPOs in the stock market, so you are actually activating more the stock market in this place. Thirdly, you are pooling foreign currency, and this is not last, the most important of which, pooling foreign currency into the streams of the country. So I believe it's an excellent transaction.
What should we be expecting in the next phase?
I think next phase we are expecting another $10 billion coming from the major fund of Saudi Arabia, and this will probably be invested probably in the same way. It hasn't been announced yet. In addition to that, there was another amount that was disclosed with a $5 billion as a deposit in the Central Bank of Egypt by Saudi Arabia. We are awaiting another $5 billion from Qatar. So that was quite good. Regarding this type of transaction, but because we're talking right now about how much funds came into the country, also the Ministry of Finance has issued a bond in a Japanese market for the very first time, and actually it was
the Samurai bond.
The Samurai bond, oversubscribed with an amount of $500 million. So that's quite good. This is before the interest rate increased. So we got it at a good price. So this is what is happening when it comes to the markets. But if you're speaking what's happening in the economy, it's a completely different story.
Right, but still they say that even with these amounts going in, there will be a gap of around $17 billion.
Definitely, definitely.
How will this be handled?
Let's speak first of all about the impact on the economy that is related to the Ukrainian crisis that affected not only Egypt but the whole world. Okay. Impact on Egypt, and this is where you're coming from. The impact on Egypt is as follows. High inflation, 12.5 last month, and
12.5%.
12.5%. In addition to that, since we talked about markets, if you go now, after the Fed have increased the interest rate by 25 bips and expected to increase further in the next sessions, so you need to get money, definitely you need to go again and issue bonds. So I believe that the interest rate will be higher than before. So this is another impact. Thirdly, speaking about interest rate locally, with the inflation monitor that will be announced by the end of this month, as well as the Federal Reserve in their next meeting, allow me to tell you that USA currently is facing huge increase in inflation that never happened in its history over the last 40 years. It's reaching 8.8%. Accordingly, the Fed has announced that it might go and increase the interest not only by 25 bips, rather by 50 bips.
50 bips.
What does it mean? That you're slowing down the economy. Why we are slowing down the economy? Because the sources of funds will become more expensive. And with the current inflation, and you have low purchasing capacity because of inflation, what will happen to the company who needs to borrow and rely on borrowing, either for their working capital requirements or in order to finance a new line of business, in order to import more materials and all of these things, they will not be able to do it with all of these aspects affecting them. Interest rates from one side and the increase in the rate of whether locally or internationally, this is by itself will slow down the economy worldwide, by the way. Similarly here, if the Fed is to increase the interest by 25 or 50 bips, I think the monetary policy will have to take some actions here to increase the interest rate as well. This is coming from where?
Why? Why are we linking the two?
Very simple. The moment you increase the interest on deposits, the dollar interest on US deposits, and you don't increase the local interest rate, what will happen? Dollarization.
Investors are good.
Dollarization, immediately. No country will allow this to happen, will allow its local currency to devalue versus the dollar. So this is number one, which is very important. In addition to that, we talked about, of course, there will be a lot of problems regarding employment. You're driving the whole world into a different poverty level than what we are in right now. So the situation is very difficult, and it is what we call almost, we're getting into, I hope we don't get there, but the whole world will be suffering from stagflation if it continues to persist as such.
That will bring us to another point, but we'll postpone that for a little bit. Let's just explain the reason why the reserves, the foreign currency reserves, dipped to the current figure of 37 billion in such a short time. Why?
Two reasons. You have to pay debt, number one, and you have to get commodities which are essential for the country. I mean, we're talking here about main commodities like wheat and at a price that was much higher than they used to get it for. So this is the second reason, which is quite important. Another thing, of course, is the prices right now to import have increased significantly. While at the same time, you here in Egypt have faced the outflow of capital from Egypt toward the US because of the increase in interest rates. So they are going to a strong economy with low risk, that is the US. So you are lacking $31 billion just like that as an inflow of currency. Your tourism receipt decreased because 30% of your tourism depends on Ukraine and on Russia. On Russia. So this is another source of decrease. Actually, FPIs, foreign direct investments, FDIs, at this time have decreased because investors wanted to wait and look what's happening. They want to see when is this happening. We are still in a huge tunnel that is dark and we don't see the light yet. So you're facing capital flight, you have increase in the prices, and plus the other reasons that I mentioned, accordingly this have affected, of course, two things, the reserves and the FX.
And the FX. When do you expect the FX to rebalance or to come back to its estimated real value?
Actually, the FX is a product of supply and demand for currency. Demand for currency have increased by a number of factors. Number one, by the high price increase in most of the products that are imported from abroad. What you used to get for $1, now you get for $10. So this is meaning that you are taking resources from your available resource. So that's very important. And demand for dollars have increased substantially because of what's happening. As for the supply of dollars have decreased as due to the FPI and decrease in tourism receipts. You are moving to another equilibrium point. And the capital outflow of the FPIs have also went to almost zero. So you've lost one of your major engines for deriving dollars. Because of this, you are moving to another equilibrium point. Your question is very important. When will this happen, and will we ever come back to the previous
what needs to be
exchange?
done, right?
I think a genius can answer this, but it's a very difficult question because...
That's why you're here.
Thank you, but the situation in Ukraine is not very clear. It seems that for a certain reason there is prolongation from both sides of the equation, and this is affecting the whole world. Different countries have right now riots. They are unable to manage their lives with this high inflation rate. So actually I would say things can little bit stabilize when number one, the sanctions are a bit more rational in order for them to allow Russia to continue with, they are pumping gas, yes, to Europe, but they will stop the petroleum. But again, you have major commodities and you have very important commodities, what we call needed for different production sector, like palladium, platinum, copper, phosphate, and so on. They are the only provider of these,
Russia,
with a percentage of 40% to the world. So if this is not managed properly, the whole world is going to be affected.
All right, let's talk about sukuks now. If we're going to talk about Islamic banking for a bit, sukuk as a source of financing, what differentiates it from the bond, the normal bond that we all know?
Okay, this I will answer, but I need to, first of all, to give you an insight about something. Why are we going to sukuk? Okay. There is a lot of investors and a lot of funds in the Middle East and Asia Pacific that are actually investing in funds which are Sharia compliant. So far, you were able to go to the international market a number of times, and you were able to get a lot of bonds from, you've issued a lot of bonds into the international market. And as a matter of fact, you also went to the green, using the green bonds a year ago and obtained $750 million. Now, sukuk is a different type of investors. They are there, they have the money. So why not addressing these huge funds and issue sukuk, which are Sharia compliant, and attract them in order to get our needs of funds.
Diversify.
You're here fishing for new type of investors. And those are investors that we haven't tackled before. Okay? So this is the reason why sukuk. Number two, your question, what is the difference between a normal bond and a Sharia compliant, or what we call a sukuk? Number one, the bond, when you issue a bond, it's a debt. When you issue a sukuk, it's not a debt, it's considered a certificate of investment. Why? Because you participate with the bondholder or the sukuk project that will generate profits. Bonds, you have interest rate, okay, that is actually paid to the bondholders. It's a debt, so you have to pay the interest rate to the lenders. Under sukuk, it's a different story.
It's a partnership.
It's a partnership, and it's a profit generation.
Right.
You will find out, for instance, that there are some type of industries that cannot be covered by sukuk. For instance, alcohol. We have
alcohol here. You're talking tourism sector.
No,
projects related
in projects.
Hotels, for example, you serve alcohol, so sukuk will not be issued there.
I don't think so. No. So you have alcohol, you have porks, you have military equipment, for that matter, tobacco, gambling. All of these industries are prohibited under the Sukuk, but not prohibited under the bondholder. Another thing which is crucial is that under bonds, you worry, number one, about the credit worthiness of the one who is
Issuing
the bond, about his credit worthiness and how can we pay. But under Sukuk, it's either asset-based or asset-backed. Okay? I think Egypt have worked out a special formula where there will be some assets identified, yes, but it will be mainly on the credit worthiness of the country. And by credit worthiness here, you're speaking about the rating of the country and the outlook of the rating, other major indicators and so on. So, but this is the primary thing. And in addition to that, you finalize that you're not going to get any mortgage or sale on any assets.
So that makes that clarifies the difference between the two. Bearing this in mind, bearing the diversity of the investors, bearing the country's diversification of its debt, if you will, and the current situation globally, economically, it brings us to a point or to a concept that one must take a look at and revisit: globalization. Here, when we talk globalization, the world is but a global village, we're all interconnected and so on and so forth, but we've went through different stages that make one stop to think, is it sustainable? Will globalization persist, or will it cease to exist?
Actually, it's an excellent question. I mean, the whole philosophy of globalization started with interaction between different countries. Integration, whether you're talking about horizontal or vertical integration in different industries together, based on, let's say, Egypt have a competitive advantage in one product that another doesn't have the same competitive advantage. Egypt had ample resources in one product, others do not have this, so there was a kind of integration between the countries. But this war has opened the eye of a lot of people and about the sustainability of globalization.
The war, and before that, the pandemic.
The pandemic is not like the war. The war effect is much higher. Let me tell you why. For instance, the SWIFT. SWIFT is a system used by banks for a number of reasons. Number one, transfer of currency. Number two, FX products. Number three, trade finance. This is a system that is used by more than 100,000 different financial institutions. If you don't have the SWIFT, you cannot transfer the money. And at the same time, you cannot carry bags and travel. It's illogical. Let's look at China. China prepared a system for them called PIX that covers and the needs and is utilized by more than 10,000 financial institutions, very close to what we call the SWIFT. Russia created between 2014 to today their own internal system, and this was around 400 users. So right now what you see is that if you stop a system that serves the world in a country that is major producer of major commodities, whether final commodities or raw material or energy or, then what are you doing here? Then you're not providing the products and you're not getting the money on the other side. So this is not working. So you need, I'm sure Russia started thinking about the backup system in 2014 and they created this one. China already did it. Coming to another point from the individual's point of view, and I never thought I would talk about it in my life, but it happened. We always thought of Switzerland as a safe haven for money. With the two incidents that happened, 18,000 names disclosed, and at the very same time, sanctions imposed on individuals, not countries, just by the fact that our Russians, whether the president daughters or what they call the oligarch or something like this, all of this.
It questions.
So the point is, a lot of people who consider Switzerland
A safe haven.
as a safe haven, it's not anymore. A third thing, the cryptocurrency. A lot of people would consider the cryptocurrency safer than putting your money in banks, because they can be sanctioned anytime. You don't know, and then you're in the air. So I believe that this is not going to go unnoticed. And I believe that countries, if they didn't start thinking already about having a system in place for their own needs, cover their needs, you have a backup scenario always in the major issues that can affect the country. I believe this is coming. Individual will be thinking about where to put their money, and over time,
so a change in the
is
global
going,
system,
of course,
is what you expect in the coming stage.
Yeah.
Ms. Sahar Damati, banking and economic expert, and many other renowned and professional titles. Always a pleasure having you, and thank you for your insight and the valuable insight that you have shared with us. A pleasure having you, in Ramadan Kareem.
Ramadan Kareem.
Thank you for watching. See you again same time next week. I'm Ayman Salah. Good night.